In 1815, after decades of war tore Europe apart, the major powers sat down in Vienna and wrote a rulebook for international relations. This rigid hierarchy of 19th-century diplomacy placed the ambassador at the top, representing a sovereign monarch, and ministers below. Rejecting this monarchical association, the young, democratic United States actively refused the title of ambassador. Until 1893, America's highest diplomats were strictly ministers. Arguing over titles sounds like extreme political pedantry, but it was a carefully engineered linguistic framework. When heavily armed empires interact, a misunderstood title or slight can quickly spiral into conflict. By locking communication into precise, predictable channels, leaders created a literal mechanism for survival. The rigid language of diplomacy functioned as a structural guardrail against uncontrolled military escalation. Today, those guardrails are gone. In April 2026, the formal language of international diplomacy has been replaced by active warfare and burning infrastructure. Instead of diplomatic cables, communication now happens via public ultimatums. President Donald Trump recently posted to his Truth Social platform explicitly demanding the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz by threatening Iranian leadership with the phrase, "Open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell." This public threat arrived 5 weeks into a grinding war with Iran. Along with the post, the president set a hard Tuesday evening deadline to begin attacking the country's civilian infrastructure. Firing off expletive-laden ultimatums online actively dismantles the historical purpose of statecraft. By communicating entirely through public threats, the administration has eliminated the traditional off-ramps required to de-escalate a crisis. This map highlights exactly what is at stake. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow, 21-mile choke point that facilitates the movement of roughly a fifth of the world's total oil supply. With that much economic power on the line and absolutely no diplomatic backchannels functioning, the disputing nations are resorting to chaotic, high-risk military actions to impose their will. That chaos recently resulted in a U.S. F-15E Strike Eagle crashing deep behind Iranian enemy lines. Getting the aviators out required a massive multi-aircraft rescue operation. To mask the extraction, the CIA intentionally spread misinformation inside Iran, claiming American forces were already moving the downed crew to create confusion on the ground. It worked, but the operation highlights a grim reality. Without communication channels to negotiate the return of captured personnel, states are forced to rely exclusively on highly kinetic, incredibly risky military extractions. The conflict has now progressed into a new, more destructive phase. Formal negotiations have been entirely replaced by the tit-for-tat targeting of economic and civilian infrastructure. Israel recently executed a devastating strike on the massive South Pars petrochemical plant in Iran. The attack effectively paralyzed half of the country's entire petrochemical production capability. Iran has responded with heavy asymmetric retaliation, launching deadly missile strikes that hit residential buildings in the Israeli city of Haifa, while deploying drone attacks against energy sites across the Gulf. As the geographical footprint of the war expands, the president's public rhetoric is causing severe political fallout back in the United States. Bipartisan alarm is growing. Independent Senator Bernie Sanders publicly labeled the president's online rhetoric the ravings of a dangerous and mentally unbalanced individual, while other politicians have begun whispering about invoking the 25th Amendment to declare the president unfit for office. Unchecked executive rhetoric carries dual consequences. It accelerates foreign conflicts toward the threshold of war crimes, while simultaneously triggering acute constitutional crises at home. Right now, the geopolitical standoff is caught between two extremely tight timelines. Regional mediators are frantically pushing a 45-day ceasefire proposal drafted by Pakistan, while the American military deadline continues to tick down. If the strait is not reopened by Tuesday evening, the president has explicitly threatened to obliterate Iranian power plants and bridges. International legal experts and officials from the European Union have issued immediate warnings. Targeting civilian structures like these explicitly violates the Rome Statute and constitutes an illegal war crime. 2 centuries ago, the diplomats in Vienna spent months arguing over the exact definitions of words like ambassador and minister. They understood that careful, formal speech forces leaders to pause, calculate, and communicate clearly before acting. Words in statecraft act as the final barrier against total destruction. When leaders abandon that protective language to threaten civilian infrastructure online, they guarantee that bombs will inevitably follow.